Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, welcome to the fourth episode of the second series of History Nights. It's a collaboration between Feed and Islamic Relief. And for this series, we had our wonderful guest with us who's joined us from Senegal today, Brother Ustad Mustafa Briggs. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. It's a pleasure to join you guys here from West
How is
Africa.
your how's family? How's everything in Senegal? Good?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, everything's amazing, mashallah. Alhamdulillah. It's just
You're,
super, super, super hot. But other than that, mashallah, we thank Allah.
don't, bro. Don't. It's like, it's freezing down here in London.
But it's not even that kind of heat that you can it's heat where your clothes are soaked. If you take a walk to the masjid and come back, it's really intense. But alhamdulillah, other than that, we're enjoying
But
ourselves.
your hats seem to just get better and better, bro. There's like dapper hats, mashallah.
I've been wearing the same hats the whole series.
You say one or they look different, no?
No, do you know what it is? I've got a few, but they're different colors. It's the same color, but I've got a few different designs.
Oh, good. Right, brothers and sisters, thank you so much for joining us once again. Those of you who have already shared, thank you so much. If you haven't, the biggest way that you can support us with this show is push it, share it on your feed so that other people get to see it, inshallah. And that would help us bring up the numbers, but more so importantly is that will reach more people, inshallah. If you're watching on Facebook, please like and share. If you're watching YouTube, subscribe. And if you're watching and switch on the notification bell icon, and if you're watching on Twitter, retweet, inshallah. Today's topic, the final topic for this series, which is Ella Collins and the woman behind Islam in America. I know last week we discussed. I think I was supposed to be my last week was supposed to be my last one, but unfortunately, Atik couldn't join us, so I'm having to cover him.
That's fortunately I get to come back.
Yeah. Don't tell Atik that he might not be happy if you say it's fortunate. But yeah, so today's topic is the final topic, and I think it's inshallah we'll go out with a bang with this one. It's very relevant. It's very in a topical discussion. So over to Ustad. Jazakallah khair for joining us today, and over to you.
Alhamdulillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashraf al-anbiya wal-mursaleen. Sayyidina Mohammed wa ala alihi wa ashabihi haqqa qadrihi wa miqdarihi al-azim. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana wa innaka antal alimul hakim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. It's a pleasure to join you again for the fourth week and for the final installment of our Black History Month series. And this week I'm going to talk about 1 and 3 in very, 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 very important figures who were essential in the establishment of Islam in the Americas as we know it today. So if we look at the Islam in America, it's always in Black History Month where we always talk about people like Bilal and Malcolm X. Those are the two main figures I grew up whenever it was Black History Month, hearing people talk about them. But many people, through discovering Malcolm X and the legacy that he had in spreading Islam in the Americas and across the world and the influence he's had on Islam in the 21st century, we mustn't forget the pioneers, the female pioneers of spreading Islam in the Americas. And it was their work and their efforts that created the environment that brought forth people like Malcolm X and Imam Warith Muhammad, etc., who affected the face of Islam in the 21st century. If we look at America, 25% of American Muslims are African American, and many of them came to Islam through the Nation of Islam originally, and after that with the Warith Muhammad community and many other communities in that side of the world. And so it's essential when looking at the history of Islam in the Americas, which is essentially one of the largest sections of Black history in Islam outside of Africa. It is the largest section of Black history in Islam and the most influential, as we know the influence that people like Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali had on popular culture and had on Islam and in spreading Islam for the past 50 and 60 years. It's essential for us to look at people like Ella Collins and the women behind these movements who are the mothers and the backbones of these movements. So if we look at Malcolm X, and as I said, we're taking a break from talking about Malcolm X to talking about the women behind the movements that created Malcolm X. If we look at Malcolm X, we know that he came to Islam through a movement called the Nation of Islam movement. So many people do not agree with points in their aqidah, and many people don't agree with points in their doctrine, but that's not what we're here to discuss. We're here to discuss the social and historical impact that they had in creating an environment where people became familiar with the names of Allah and the name of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and through that they managed to find themselves returned to Islam, which was the religion of a lot of their ancestors. And so when talking about Malcolm X, when talking about Muhammad Ali, we have to mention the Nation of Islam and acknowledge the work that they have done in establishing a community that brought forth thousands and thousands of people who would later become Muslims, and the effect that they had in creating that environment where people were familiar with the names of Allah and with the name of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And as we know, the Nation of Islam was founded by a man called W.D. Fard Muhammad, but it reached its peak when it came under the guidance of Elijah Muhammad, who served as a teacher and a mentor to Malcolm X and to Muhammad Ali and to the hundreds of thousands who embraced the Nation of Islam doctrine and became members of the organization. But what is not too well known outside of the names Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X is that the first lady of Nation of Islam, as she was known, Sister Clara Muhammad, was the backbone and the pillar of this movement. And she was even the one who introduced her husband to the teachings of Nation of Islam. Her husband was Elijah Muhammad, who we all know as the leader of the movement. So when W.D. Fard Muhammad founded the movement in the early 30s, Sister Clara Muhammad was one of his earliest disciples. And she convinced her husband, then known as Elijah Paul, to become a member. And he became W.D. Fard Muhammad's successor and took leadership of the Nation of Islam movement. And Sister Clara Muhammad was by his side the entire time. Sister Clara Muhammad was the one that helped him establish the community and organize it. And even from the years of 1935 to 1946, as he fled death threats from rival temple leaders and was incarcerated for sedition during World War II, Sister Clara Muhammad was actually the one who took over the organization and used to run it. And during the Nation of Islam's earliest days, she helped and establish and run the University of Islam, as it was called, and the Muslim Girls Training Schools. And these were essential and revolutionary in the history of education, not just in the Muslim community, but in American society in general, as it was the largest network of homeschooling networks in the country. And so when she established these schools, she established them to provide education for the Nation of Islam members' children. And it was my apologies. The connection here, and I'm in a village called Medina Bay, and the connection comes and goes. And so she established these schools, and these schools educated the Nation of Islam's children, and it became one of the first models of homeschooling in American society. And what is interesting is that she passed away, unfortunately, in 1972 after a long bout with stomach cancer. And her son, Warithdin Muhammad, who became the successor of Elijah Muhammad and who converted the Nation of Islam to Sunni Islam in what was noted to be the largest mass conversion of people to Sunni Islam in the history of America, and some say in the history of the world, as thousands of members of the Nation of Islam converted to Islam through him and through his movement. When he assumed leadership of Nation of Islam in 1975, he renamed the University of Islam schools the Sister Clara Muhammad schools in her honor. And these schools still exist today in America, and there are over 75 Clara Muhammad schools across the nation. And the biggest one being in Atlanta, which was the original one and which was the headquarters. So we can see that Sister Clara Muhammad had an amazing and powerful impact on the Nation of Islam, as she was the woman behind the men that we know. She was the woman behind Elijah Muhammad, the woman behind Malcolm X, and the mother of Imam Warithdin Muhammad, who we can say is one of the most influential figures in Islam in the 21st century, specifically in America. She was the one that raised him, gave birth to him, trained him, and instilled in him the leadership qualities that allowed him to grow up and guide thousands and thousands of people to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then coming to the main person who we're talking about in this event is Sister Ella Collins, who was the elder sister of Malcolm X. So as I mentioned earlier, most of us know about Malcolm X. We know about his history. We know about his massive impact that he had on the world and the thousands and thousands of people who he has touched. But Sister Ella Collins was the one that touched him and inspired him to become the person that we all know as Malcolm X today. She used to visit him when he was a child. She was much older than him. She visited him, and he described her when he saw her in 7th grade in his autobiography as being the first really proud black woman he had ever seen. And he wrote, "I had never been so impressed with anybody in my life." And in the final end of his school year, he moved to Roxbury in Massachusetts to live with her in Boston. And she was his legal guardian until he turned 21 years old. So after Malcolm X was incarcerated, Sister Ella Collins was the one that introduced him to the teachings of the Nation of Islam, as she became a member of that organization before him. And he then went on to become the figure that we know today in the Nation of Islam, and after that, the figure that we know today in Sunni Islam in general. And what's interesting, that we can see a pattern. We can see, for example, Sister Clara Mohammed introducing her husband Elijah Muhammad to the nation, and then we see Ella Collins introducing her younger brother Malcolm X to the nation. And then when she, after converted to Sunni Islam, she inspired Malcolm X to convert to Sunni Islam as well. And when he left the Nation of Islam in 1964, Ella Collins was the one that paid for him to make Hajj. So the famous Hajj that we all know Malcolm X for, the Hajj that changed his viewpoint of the world, the Hajj that was so revolutionary and launched him as an international Muslim figure, and the effects of which we still see today, that Hajj was paid for by Sister Ella Collins, and she was the one that inspired him to make that trip and make that journey. And when he was assassinated, she was also the one that paid for his funeral and business expenses after his assassination, and took over his organization of Afro-American Unity, which had included a project of giving 35 scholarships from Al-Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt, and from the University of Ghana to students who wished to study overseas. So we can see then that the two major figures, the two major men, Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, and the third, Warithin Muhammad, all had these powerful, influential, and inspirational women behind them, and they are the ones that led them to be the men that they were today and affect the world in the way they did. So indirectly, the same way we have Mother Hagar, who was the mother of Sayyidina Ismail, who was the establishment of the Kaaba, who was the establisher of the Kaaba and the mother of Mecca, we see this pattern of motherhood, this pattern of womanhood, this pattern of leadership and guidance in female form repeated in the form of these women. And a third figure who's not as well known, but who I feel should be known by anyone and everyone who wants to know about the history of Islam in the Americas, is Sayyidah Khadija, of the New York City's largest and most prominent mosque for roughly 2 decades, which was known as the Islamic Mission in New York City. So at the same time that the Nation of Islam was gaining traction and gaining converts, there was a sheikh called Sheikh Dawood Faisal who came from the Caribbean and immigrated with his wife, Sister Khadija, to New York. And they took their home, which was a hub for the artists and the intellectuals of New York at that time, and opened their home to serve as a school of elocution for neighborhood children. So they were very big on education, they were very big on community work, and they were very big on spreading the message and educating the people. Then when they converted to Islam, they converted their house into a mosque, and it became one of New York City's first and most prominent mosques, the Islamic Mission of America. And this was in the year 1939, as far back as 1939. So Sister Khadija and her husband Sheikh Dawood Faisal ran this mosque, and it served as New York City's largest and most prominent mosque for roughly 2 decades. And it's still used as a masjid and a place of worship today. But what was revolutionary about Sister Khadija and her role in this organization is that she started a section of the organization called Ladies Cultural Society. My apologies. And the Muslim Ladies Cultural Society provided women in the local community with a model for active and engaging community leadership. And so she used to travel with her husband across the country, speaking to groups of women, as well as mentoring nearly 2 generations of Muslim women in New York City from the late 1930s all the way until 1990. And Mother Khadija had an immeasurable impact on the spread and development of Islam in the region. So we can look at her and know that she was a mother for thousands of Muslims in New York. She was very active and spreading the work of Islam. When speaking about Islam in the Americas, it's essential for us to talk about these 3 figures as they served as the foundation, the cornerstone, and the backbone of Islam in that continent and in the world, we can say, in the 21st century. As Sister Clara Mohammed, who was the mother of the Nation of Islam, the First Lady, and the woman who produced the likes of Imam Warathin Muhammad and supported the likes of Imam Elijah Muhammad, is somebody who is indispensable. If we look at Sister Khadija Faisal, she's also essential in spreading the message of
I'm sorry. Sorry. Maybe want to rewind a bit.
in
Sorry, viewers.
mentoring thousands and
Unfortunately,
thousands of women across generations, nearly 2 to 3 generations. And if we look at Ella Collins, who was the older sister and guide and mentor to Malcolm X, who then went on to influence and thousands of others, we can see that it's dispensable for us to know and understand these 3 women's stories to make a larger picture of Islam in the West. My connection is very terrible and I apologize for that. I'm sending you all my greetings, and I think I'm going to end the presentation here and hand over to my brother who's appeared in the corner. Alhamdulillah, I hope I was able to say what I needed to say and teach what I
Jazakallah khair,
needed to
because,
teach, inshallah. And hopefully the
we
connection
heard
won't run
you.
out before I can say goodbye. Assalamu alaikum.
So Jazakallah khair, but Ustad Mustafa unfortunately has got some technical issues in Senegal. As you can imagine, the Wi-Fi connection is always not that strong. So inshallah, we'll try and connect back with him another time. But this was the last episode. I think we got the gist of the story. The last few minutes were a bit fuzzy. Other than that, I think most of it was covered, inshallah. But I think because it didn't end the way we wanted it to end, I think this is where we plead to our friends at Ilfeed, where I think we will have to do another one with Ustad Mustafa Briggs so that we can, inshallah, wrap it up in style. But other than that, for those of you who've been watching so far, this series is this is the final episode of the series, and your friends and family who may have missed it previously, do send them the links. They're all on the Facebook pages, all on YouTube channels. All the videos are there. We had 4 episodes. This was the 4th and final one. We did have a history nights previously in season 1 with Ilmfeed, which was during the Hajj days, was Hajj stories. So if you missed that, then go and visit those. Those are, mashallah, very sweet 20-minute style stories of people's travels and journeys, throughout history. So that's a very nice plug there. Other than that, brothers and sisters, Jazakallah khair. I know so many of you were commenting. I did forget to mention, do comment where you're watching from. It gives us understanding of how far this is reaching, inshallah. And finally, brothers and sisters, Ilmfeed and Islamic Relief have been working on this together. So there's a lot of people behind the screen, particularly in the Ilmfeed team, that you don't see, but they're there continuously pressing the buttons, clicking away. Do make dua for them that Allah can, increases their ability to do more for the community, for our ummah, and Allah accepts their effort. There's so many people behind the screens. We take the credit for it when we do half the work. The bulk of the work, in fact, is done behind the scenes. So may Allah reward them, give them in your du'as. And today is in the UK now. Anyway, it's Rabiul Awal, 12th of Rabiul Awal. And so, according to many narrations, this is the date of birth for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, inshallah, we end in a beautiful ending with durood and salat and salam on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. Brothers and sisters, stay well, keep well. See you guys soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.